are trickling in, so cool.
Okay, I'm gonna record now. Oops, not share my screen. That's not what you want me to do. Record to the cloud. Perfect. Sadaf, have a wonderful session. I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
Letting people in.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon if you're in the central time zone. Good morning or good evening, depending on where you're coming in from. Welcome to our final Power Skills session for Power Skills 2021. Lives Transformed, our post-pandemic era. Welcome, everyone. I can't believe I just said this is our last session. It feels bittersweet because I've been taking in so much information and gathering so much like wow stuff that my face has been hurting because I've been smiling and nodding so much. And I've been seeing a lot of folks coming into session after session with us, and I'm just so pleased because I'm only assuming that you're feeling the same way. We're gonna get ready to kick things off straight away because we've got a lot of material to cover, and we wanna leave time for some networking. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Zita. I am a CAT, which means I'm from the Career and Transition Services with McGill University School of Continuing Studies. I'm going to go with what I see on my screen. So to the left of me, I see my colleague Nayo. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm another career advisor of the CATS team, and I'm delighted to be here.
Wonderful. And to the right of me, I see another colleague of mine pop in under Power Skiller 2021, Ms. Emily Salvi.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm another happy cat and happy to be here.
Wonderful. And I'm actually not going to introduce our keynote addresser for right now until we do something. I'm going to play our land acknowledgement to officially start our session, and then I will introduce our speaker. So if you don't mind, everyone, can you kindly keep yourselves on mute? I'm going to share my screen for a moment. We have a very short video to play to acknowledge the land by which we are using, and we will get started. Once we find my land acknowledgement. Okay, ça va bien. Here we go. Thank you, everybody. I would just like to take a moment to say this is already the third and final installment of this edition's iterations of Power Skills. This year's theme was Lives Transformed, our post-pandemic era. I'd like to recognize that we at CAT acknowledge that our work in Montreal takes place on the unceded Indigenous lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk Nation. This land is known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and at Power Skills, we are committed to use the summit as a place of gathering, connection, reconnection, and empowerment to all voices and perspectives by providing free and accessible learning opportunities and connection. With that said, I would really like to ask you to also reflect on where you may be tuning in from, regardless of where you are, to find out a little bit more about about the land by which we're using, by which you are getting all the opportunities to plant fruitfully in your own gardens, so to speak. So we ask that you take a minute to reflect on that and to give thanks for what's come before us so we can continue to prosper together. And now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest today, and what a wonderful way to end. We're ending on a high note and with a bang, because we're talking about everything post-pandemic, during the pandemic, how things have changed and how we've had to pivot. Well, the topic of networking comes up and everyone freaks out because how are we going to do this? Well, our speaker today is Sadaf, and she definitely has a few things up her sleeve, just nonetheless. And why I'm happy to introduce her is because she has a wealth of knowledge, but mostly she is also such a gifted speaker. So allow me to read her bio. Sadaf is an educator, a speaker, a facilitator with a passion for networking. Moving from a long career in philanthropy and sponsorship, Sadaf has joined the fast-paced world of SaaS in 2019 to focus on her insights, building relationships, and helping people network. So who better to have this conversation with than with Sadaf, right? Sadaf also teaches part-time at the Faculty of Business at Humber College. When she's not working, you can see Sadaf on the dance floor as an inspiring salsa dancer. I love that. Or looking for the next romantic comedy on Netflix. When you figure some, how about you send me a playlist? And she's with her adorable kitties, Mimi and Pico. So you are also part of the kitten crew. So welcome, Sadaf. I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to invite you to take over. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Zita. Thank you for that introduction. I am very, very happy to be here today. Welcome and hello. I'm sharing my screen and I hope that everybody can see it. Zita, if you give me a thumbs up, then I'll know. And you can hear me obviously because you're responding, so fantastic. Thank you so much. I am very, very excited to be here today to talk to you about inclusive networking in a hybrid world. I see some familiar faces here. Renee, hello. I see, I thought I saw Despina. Hi, Despina. Welcome and thank you so much for joining. Today, we're going to talk about inclusive networking in a hybrid world, and how we're going to do this is we're starting off with some introductions. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and so I'd love for you to say hello in the chat. So if you can put your name in, say where you're from, say why you're coming to the session, what you're interested in, just introduce yourself, and so that we can get some networking going on amongst the group, which is going to be so fun. We're going to talk a little bit about what is networking, and then what is inclusive networking. Then we're going to look at if we have diverse networks right now. Then we're going to look at what just happened, like what happened in this pandemic, what the last 18 months, what the hell was that all about? And then we're going to go to networking in a hybrid world, which is where we are right now. Okay, and then hopefully I move quickly enough to have at least 10 minutes of questions. I am not known for my ability to be succinct. I do like to talk. So Zita, keep me on time and interrupt me if you need.
I'll take you up on that. I'm not sure if you're sharing slides. We don't see anything just yet.
Oh, I am sharing slides.
No, we see your desktop. So that's why we said, let's slide in here and tell you.
That is not show my desktop. Hold on. That is not fun. How embarrassing.
But human, right? This is a part of this whole connection that we see happening all the time. There we go. We got some slides. I love it.
Look, there's actually the agenda. Oh God. Meanwhile, you were probably evaluating my desktop and like, she's so messy. Yes, okay. No judgment here today. All right, folks. Thank you. Let's keep going. Okay, I'm going to tell you a bit about myself. My name is Sadaf Virji. I am a networking coach. I am an educator. I am a salsa dancer, as you can see in the middle. And I came to Canada when I was 18 years old as an international student. And I came for what I thought was going to be a walk in the park. I thought I was going to just go to school, and I'd been to school school my entire life, and it was going to be fantastic. And it was fantastic, but it wasn't easy. And so one of the things that I have learned along the way is how to network and be successful in a Canadian context. And networking is what I found to be one of the key pillars for my success. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I am also, yes, when I am not working, and by the way, I should say I work at a company called 10,000 Coffees, which is a virtual networking platform. What does it do for you? Basically, it's like a dating site for professional networking, okay? So you put your profile in and you fill out your information, and then the system matches you up based on your professional goals, not anything personal. Please do not start dating through 10,000 Coffees, and do not say that I said that, okay? And when I am not dancing and not working, I am hanging out with my two adorable kitties, Mimi and Pico, who I am obsessed with. Now, I hope you guys are all saying hello and meeting one another and getting to know each other also in the group. And hopefully we'll have time for that more at the end. But let's move on and talk about what is networking. And if you've been to one of my other talks, you will know that I've talked about this before, and you'll know very quickly what the answer is. Traditionally, networking is defined, and this is a definition by the Webster Dictionary: the exchange of information or services among individuals, groups, or institutions, specifically the cultivation of productive relationships for employment or business. And if you've been to one of my other talks, you will also know that I very openly and frankly reject this definition of networking, because I refuse to accept that networking is just for the sake of getting a job or creating some kind of business transaction. Instead, my definition of networking is the art of human connection. Is simply to connect with human beings on a very personal level. And so what does this mean? You know, what do I mean by saying making a human connection? Basically, you're looking to make friends and not transactions, right? And so oftentimes we think about networking and we're exchanging business cards, or we're thinking about, oh, how can this person help me with my next sales deal because I have such a huge sales quota and blah, blah, blah. But I want you to start shifting to think about networking in a slightly different way, and that is to making human connections, making friends. And so that means you're connecting on values and interests and ideas, not how the other can benefit you. Okay? I want you to ask yourself every time you have the opportunity where you're meeting new people or in a new situation, a new scenario, or even in an existing one, who can you make friends with today? And I'm going to pause here for a quick second and ask if there are any questions before I move on to inclusive networking, which is an interesting concept that not a lot of people have a definition around. So we're going to define it together. Any questions around what networking is, or what I think networking is? And feel free to add in your comments in the chat box if you agree or disagree. Happy to deal with those as well. Sounds like we are all good. So I'm going to continue, but Zita, please catch anything that comes and feel free to interrupt, and I'll answer questions. So what, as we start to understand inclusive networking, let's also understand inclusion. Can anyone tell me what they understand about inclusion? Like, what is it?
So if I may, Sadaf, I just want to encourage you, if you want to share, you can take yourself off mute and just say real quick. I'll consider that Renee has said when everyone is welcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Anybody else? No. Very simply put, I like to call inclusion when someone feels like they belong or like they can be themselves in a particular environment. So very similar to what you were saying, Renee, when someone feels welcome, right?
So Sadaf, we've gotten some comments and invitation to participate, and when people feel comfortable enough to show up authentically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that authentic one, right? Because oftentimes inclusion, like when you define inclusion in a workplace, it usually means that you can show up exactly as you are without consequences of being you, right? So what is inclusive networking then?
I'm so impressed for talking about this because I can admit that I've never actually thought about networking in an inclusive or exclusive fashion. I've always thought of it maybe as a nerve-wracking thing and stopped it there, but not whether or not I was welcome or making people welcome. This is really interesting.
In fact, if you Google it, you'll be hard pressed to find a definition. There's not a lot of people talking about what inclusive networking is. Any thoughts? Anyone want to just give it a go? Nothing yet? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll let that sit, and I'm gonna define it. And as you can see that I've tried to define this in very simple words and terms. So as if I was talking to, you know, people of all ages right now, okay? So inclusive networking, the way I look at it, is when those networking feel like they belong. And the reason that I look at it as when those who are networking feel like they belong versus making other people feel welcome is because I think all too often in academia, in our social structures today, when we look at concepts like inclusion, we define it from the perspective of the mainstream instead of the perspective of those who are marginalized. And so I'm going to try at every moment here to give you definitions and perspectives of those who are marginalized instead of rooting our definitions and the way we talk about concepts in that of white supremacy. Let's just say it. Okay. Now, here's a spoiler alert. If you are practicing inclusive networking, you will have a diverse network. Does this resonate with anyone? Does this make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit more about a diverse network. Can anyone tell me why it is important to have a diverse network? We know there's a lot of research been done around this. So this should be a fairly simple, straightforward answer. Any leaders here, any people who are managers or people leaders in their organizations want to pipe up also to talk a little bit about the importance of a diverse network or a diverse team?
So Tennille says 100% makes sense. Renee says absolutely right. And to the last point, to have different viewpoints.
Yes, diversity of perspective often leads to creativity. Right? Also, often leads to when you have, particularly if you're client facing, you want a team that is diverse because our world is diverse, right? So you want to be able to do business with Hong Kong, and you want to be able to do business in Turkey, and you want to be able to do business in Japan and all different parts of the world. And in order to do that, either we need some cultural training, which sometimes happens, but because of something called bias, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, people are trust those who are like themselves. And so having a diverse team is super important for your productivity, for work, for relationships, for just general perspective. Let's do a little activity and let's find out if we have a diverse network. Okay, so I'm going to ask each one of you, and you know, do this on your own. Feel free to take a second, pull up your phone. If you're on your phone, if you're able to find, like, just pause this for a second and go look at your text messages. I want you to pull up your text messages, and if you don't use text messages, the list of people that you've called last on your phone, and I want you to write down or take a mental note of the people that you see in your view. So maybe there's 5 or 10 messages or 5 or 10 people that you can see, and write down their names and perhaps just, you know, kind of make a note of who is there. And I want you to now ask yourself how many of those people look like you or sound like you. And when I say look like you, let's look at your ethnic background, but also let's look at your socio-cultural, so your cultural background. Let's look at the first language that you speak, your marital status, your age, your sexual orientation. And how many of those do you find in common with your most recent connections, which we assume are your most frequent connections. Okay, so if you are, let's say, like Zita is running this Power Skills, and maybe she's calling people all over the country today, so maybe her list looks out of whack because she's talking to people that she doesn't usually. But then you do this exercise in a day that you perhaps haven't talked to a bunch of strangers because you're working on a specific project that requires you to. But I want you to basically take a look at who's in your inner circle and put check marks for every time you see something in common that's similar to you. And if you end up with a list that looks like there's a ton of check marks, then you have a lot of people that look like you in your network. So similarly, if you can look at your LinkedIn account. Now, sometimes this is going to be different because you just looked at your personal network, and now we're going to take a look at your professional network. Take a look at your LinkedIn account, go to your home feed or to your list of friends, and now answer the same question. How many people look and sound like you? Are they all in the same industry? Are they all engineers because you are an engineer? Or are they majority in tech because you're an engineer, but you work in tech? So take a look at diversity of thought, field, and experience from the workplace. In addition to, do they look and sound like you? And now I'm going to ask you a very important question. Some of you may have very diverse networks, some of you may not. How many people did you inherit in these two networks? And when I say inherit, I mean mostly in your personal network. Let's say you have someone on your list who is completely different from you in every possible way, but you inherited them because your sister married somebody who was out of the community, let's say. And so your brother-in-law is someone you talk to frequently, and they are completely different. That is someone you inherited, okay? Versus someone you acquire into your network, versus someone that you made friends with organically, someone that you went to school with and you've kept up with, who's your best friend, someone you have worked with and you get along really well, and now you are attached at the hip. Think about that, right? Think about where you're sitting, and that tells you today, do you have a diverse network? Or not so much. And what you want to do about that next is up to you, but I'm hoping that all of you are here, and so you're looking for more of a diverse network and more of inclusive networking. Now, also I want you to ask yourself this question. If you don't have a diverse network, what could be the cause? Anybody want to be vulnerable and say something about that? Anyone want to perhaps give a reason?
Well, maybe in my environment, it's because right now I'm at university, so I need to be with people like it's kind of like me, like in the same career, in the same country, but maybe because of the career, in a certain point of the career of the university, I will have a diverse network because it's languages. So I need to be sorry.
No, take your time.
Yeah, I need to be like talking to other people from other countries, but right now that I am a student, I can't.
Okay.
Or
so it's your current environment or circumstances that are putting you in this situation. Yeah, okay. That could be a reason. Anybody else want to share? Again, dig deep, particularly if you're advanced in your career, and think about since you've had time to build your network.
Sadaf, Renee writes in the chat, fear of rejection.
Fear of rejection. Yeah.
Emily writes, I never thought about it, and I'm comfortable with my connections of people who I trust.
Okay, yes, trust. That's a really, really good one. Okay. A lot of the reason that we perhaps don't have a diverse network is because our brain basically tells us. So you all know and probably have heard of something called affinity bias. And that really is what one of the big reasons why we end up having the same network. But there's also things like trust and also things like fear of rejection. I'm going to kind of bring this all together. So basically our brain, it's normal to have bias. Let's just if you are feeling uncomfortable about the fact that, oh gosh, I've discovered that I do have a bias because look, my network is very not diverse, understand that it is normal to have bias. Our brains are wired to protect us, and it requires, because it's also lazy AF, like so lazy, our brain, it needs to take pieces of information in order to comprehend what's in front of it, something new, right? And so it stores that information in a little box or filing cabinet. And when you are faced with people or situations, you have a preconceived notion based on what you know, your experiences, and the information that is in those little filing cabinets in your brain. It draws from there because it doesn't have time to figure out, okay, let me go and find out if this person is, you know, different or who they are and how they are. Our brain is also wired to protect us so we don't do things that we've never done before. Engage with people that we don't know. It's like, no, danger, danger, danger. We have to work hard. I told you it was lazy, doesn't want to work. And so when it has to work hard, when it has to protect you, it's pulling you away from engaging in new situations, right? And so this kind of bias often leads us, we know a lot of us who've been in the D&I space, who talk about D&I, which is diversity and inclusion, will understand that we are attracted to same, right? People who look like us, we trust more, right? And there is this fear because we don't know how the other person is going to react. This is all our brain creating what is bias. And we all have these preconceived notions in our head. And I'm going to do another activity with all of you right now to try and understand where biases sit. And some are quite severe. So I'm going to give you the scenario, okay? And this is a very common one if you have been to a diversity workshop or whatnot, or a bias workshop in the past. And you probably have seen this before, but bear with me if you have, and if you haven't, I want the first thing that comes to your mind. So the scenario is a father and son were involved in a car accident in which the father was killed. It's a little bit on the dark side, and the son was seriously injured. The father was pronounced dead at the scene of the accident, and his body was taken to a local morgue. The son was taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital and was immediately wheeled into an emergency operating room. A surgeon was called. Upon arrival and seeing the patient, the attending surgeon exclaimed, "Oh my God, it's my son. Can you explain this situation?" And I want the first thing that comes to your mind.
The surgeon's the mother.
The surgeon is the mother. Yes. Studies show that 40% of people who listen to this scenario are confused at first and are not able to find a quick answer. 40% of people are assuming, 40% is a high percentage. 40% of people are assuming that the surgeon is a man. And if the father just died, how the hell is this person the father? The answer is they're not. Yeah. Anyone bold enough to admit, I admit that upon first reading, I was totally confused and did not know what was happening. Any hands up? Any in the chat? This is a safe space, folks. Yes, no,
No.
maybe?
No one said anything just yet in the chat about this specifically. However, many people are still talking about why we make connections the way we do in terms of connecting with folks that are just similar to us.
Yeah.
And I can add that I admit the very first time I saw this a few years back, I didn't necessarily think that it wouldn't be the mother, but I was also thinking that maybe it was a test of same-sex marriage as well. Like, I wasn't sure. Like, I was like, okay, maybe this is also dad and dad, or, you know, like that kind of a scenario.
Look at that. You just went so in your bias, it's not included that. So that tells you something about the way you're viewing it, right? Is that you don't have that bias, which is
right.
Really-
Avril is saying in the messaging, she thought it was same. She's admitting to the bias as I am. And she's saying, I thought it was a same-sex marriage.
So it's interesting because in the same-sex marriage, you're still thinking the surgeon is a male, but you have expanded your concept of marriage to include same-sex marriage,
Right.
which is a diverse concept. So look at that. It's still really interesting how we look at gender and relationships and marriage and the situation. So what I am going to ask all of you to do, really, one little the main takeaway of my talk today, and what I'm mostly trying to do, is use networking to challenge the bias and break down barriers. Okay. And I'm going to pause here for a quick second, and maybe we can read some comments if they've come in, or if there are any questions so far, because after this, think of this as the intermission. If you've ever been to a Bollywood movie, there's always an intermission in the middle. And we're going to take an intermission, almost a few minutes, to pause and talk about what we've talked about so far: networking, bias, inclusion, all of those things, because now we're going to move to what the pandemic has done to us, which is havoc. But if there are any thoughts, comments, or conversations that, about this that I can add to, I'd love to pause here.
Sadaf, just one question.
Yes, please.
Okay. The question I would have is, how does the bias change as you go from bigger, larger cities where diversity is somewhat of a norm, and especially if you look at Toronto, versus where you move out to smaller communities, smaller cities where diversity may not be as prevalent? So I assume the bias changes as depending on where you live and how that community is established. What are your thoughts around that?
So, because I don't have the research and the stats to show you, but this is my hypothesis, I'll say, is that because our brain in that situation would be faced with less diversity, likely our biases are higher. Now, this is a hypothesis, again, based on what I understand about the brain and how we interact in diverse environments. There may be an argument for the completely opposite, which is if they have no preconceived notion of how someone from this particular background is going to be, perhaps they don't have bias against them. Having said that, they will still have bias for same, right? So the first choice, if you're hiring in a small town and you have several candidates, one who is someone from a completely different country, someone who you have never met before, and the others include the son of someone that you grew up with, you went to school with, and that you trust, you have a strong relationship with, trust is already built there. And because our brain would have to work harder to create trust with someone they didn't know, from a different background, from a completely different experience, trust you'd have to start building trust from scratch. And so bias would most certainly be stronger because you're not going to see them or those situations as often. But I will also open the question to everybody else, and Amin, ask you what are your thoughts on it, and if anyone else has anything to contribute here. I think it's a really interesting question.
Yeah, the only way I'd look at it is, I think environmentally, it depends on your environment that you're where you exist. It could drive some of the biasness. I mean, I'm not suggesting. I mean, I'm a GTA person. I've worked in the Toronto area most of my life, so I'm looking at it from a perspective that I think environmentally changes the perception of how one views biasness, just depending on how exposed they are to diversity within the environment and how they create their networks based on that. But I mean, it's a loaded question in a way too, because when I asked it, I know that it's not a easy and simple solution to it, but it is. I just believe that there is some sort of view to how the environment is set up around you in order to establish how your networks look like. But that's just it's my opinion. I mean, others may think differently.
I also think that our opinions or the way that we view this will change based on if you identify with a marginalized community versus if not. And I think that's part of the bias too. You may find in I'm going to be completely open and frank here. If you go into a super white town in Canada, you might find that they believe that they don't have bias because they've never been exposed to the differences that cause them to challenge or cause bias situations, right? Anyone else who'd like to have any questions or anything else that we want to chat about here before we move into what the pandemic has done to networking?
I do actually want to maybe point out my own issue as well, that when I myself I'm in a big city, and when I go into rural cities, which is rare, I don't even know if I walk into it letting people show me that they may not have a bias, because my back is already up against a wall as well. So it's very cyclical, right? Like maybe the experience would be different if I didn't walk in with that, but my previous experiences have also shaped how I might be treated. So I have like a protective gear around me as well. So it's hard. I recognize it's hard to walk into something always with no judgment, because our experiences also shape and navigate our world. So I'm thinking of this really critically, like am I also able to walk into it and not have that thought process of they're meeting a woman of color, they're meeting an Indian woman, what do they think of my presence in front of them? How are they going to react to me in a predominantly white system, right? Like it's hard for me to navigate that.
Yeah, and that's the impact and the effect of oppression, right? And you see that with minority groups all across, right? And that you have your backup. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on into our next section, which is here. What happened? What happened in the last 18 months? What happened to networking? What happened to connecting? What happened to our workplaces? What happened in this pandemic, right? We went from this scenario that on the left-hand side to this scenario. And mind you, I didn't pick these pictures and put them in this structure on purpose, but when I did, I realized that this is extremely telling. On the left-hand side, you'll see in the stock photo, by the way, completely stock, there are 6 gentlemen, 2 women, 1 woman of color, which is probably pretty accurate for most industries, not for every industry. For the industry I come from in tech, 100%. In fact, it's probably even worse. And so you're moving to this where everyone is siloed, right? We moved from group situations, people sitting next to each other, being able to be like, hey, what's up? What's going on? What are eavesdropping? Hey, you're working on this project. Hey, do you need some help? All of these things lead to building trust, lead to building connections at work, lead to more opportunities, right? So what's happening with this woman of color and this woman here? She's standing up, she's showing some level of authority right here and telling someone something. She's telling this group of people something that's happening, right? And so she's, the physicality of being there is telling, her body language is telling us something. The way that she is addressing is telling us something. Right? All of these things are completely gone here, completely gone on the right-hand side. You've lost it. And so here's my question to you. Hypothetically, which groups do you think have been impacted the most through the pandemic when it comes to work opportunities, when it comes to networking, meeting people, their career journeys. Which groups do you think have been impacted the most, and how?
So in the chat, Carlos says extroverts, which is really interesting. I chimed in and I said mothers. Anybody else? Feel free to chat, put your comments in the chat.
Statistically, it has been women and women of color. And I don't even think there's enough research that has been done for people with disabilities and a whole slew of other minority or other like groups. So it is definitely has been an issue. Now, how have we been networking in a virtual world? To some, it's still quite new, even though we've been in a pandemic for 18 months plus. Networking in this environment is still somewhat of a new concept. And so what we're having to do right now to network is to schedule time with people. There's no more informal conversation as we're walking into the meeting room, we're walking out of the meeting room, in the kitchen, pouring a cup of coffee, all of the situations where the informal conversations were happening and trust was being built through these small little opportunities, body language, how we're talking, all of that is gone. You have to schedule not just the meetings, but you have to schedule casual time, particularly in environments where you are in an office, for example, not when you're networking with someone new, because you can't really schedule casual time with someone new. You have to be sending the right outreach message if you are reaching out to someone you don't know. You have to draft it and then redraft it and then send it and hope that they respond if you're trying to make new connections. Whereas if in person, you could have walked into a room and met somebody that you didn't know. And it was so much easier to kind of introduce yourself in various situations. Online, all of that is completely gone. What we've had to do instead is build an online brand. Right? So you have to be really heavy on who you are. Your social media channels and your networks are speaking for you, are telling people while you're sleeping and you're not online who you are. And that is helping you while you are not actively having a Zoom phone call with someone that can also get extremely exhausting, right? Because being on a computer all the time, we all know Zoom fatigue, et cetera, et cetera. Trust takes so much longer in these scenarios, so much longer. Oftentimes you see companies who are setting up like casual lunches, right? So they'll be like, have a Zoom lunch and everyone's just having lunch and be like, hey, what's going on? And those kinds of scenarios are slightly helping, but we haven't figured out the complete solution and answer for networking in a virtual world. And so my advice to all of you is sometimes you may need to have taken a break, right? Or do take a break when you need to, because it can be overwhelming. If you are in a situation where you're looking to move to a new company, new job, or get your first job, if you're in school, like some of you might be over here, it can be extremely challenging. And you may get really, really overwhelmed because you're constantly trying to meet the right person to get you that job. So take a break when you need to. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about 10,000 coffees, because I work at 10,000 coffees. So please, if you have access to 10,000 coffees, which all of you actually do, you can go to 10,000coffees.com/McGill SCS. And when you're signing up, there's an option to pick as an extended community member if you are not a member of the actual School of Continuing Studies or from McGill itself. But use programs like that because they take the work of the bias and all of that, finding someone to chat with, whatnot, out of the equation. The system will match you up based on your profile, on your career goals and your interests. Now, when it comes to networking in a hybrid world, because right now we're in some people are in person, some people are not in person. Sometimes we're slowly starting to go back to work. Few people are in the office sometimes. Maybe not. It's slowly starting to get to this place where we're in a hybrid situation. Now, with that, the first thing you need to understand is what your comfort level is regarding this health issue. Okay, so we do have a pandemic still happening. The virus is still around. What is your comfort level? Are you vaccinated? Are you not? Are you okay meeting people who are not vaccinated in various situations? Are you okay going on public transit because of the various situations? You have to figure out what your comfort level is before you get out there into the world, right? You also need to relearn how to have small talk and function in person. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, I went for dinner with my girlfriend to an indoor restaurant for the first time in months and months and months and months and months. And I was talking to my girlfriend across just the two of us, and the lovely server came along and he's like, hello. And I was like, hello. And he's like, oh, hello. I'm like, I'm sorry, I haven't talked to people in like 18 months. I don't know how to talk anymore. He's like, it's okay. We're having a lot of this. No worries. Just be yourself. And of course, I felt so stupid, being so excited and so over the top with this poor guy who was just trying to help me out in terms of my menu. But we have been at home so long and isolated so long that we've actually forgotten how to be in person. Many of you who have probably already gone in person, remember the first time it was like a couple of weeks ago, you're like, oh my God, I can meet people, I can hug people. Like, what's that all about, right? And you, again, going back to the first point, you may not be comfortable with that. So you're gonna have to determine where you're at. Now, understand that networking in a hybrid world is not going to be the same as pre-pandemic networking. You're going to have to take a little bit of what we learned from this virtual networking. It's going to be something a little bit new happening, and we don't all have the answers to that. So it's going to be uncomfortable because you're not going to exactly know what to do, what to say, and in which scenarios. And when you're going to get that networking opportunity, because it's not as simple as it was before, we are in new territory, and so we're kind of testing ourselves in this scenario. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable is my motto. For even when you're networking in a regular pre-pandemic time, most people find it very uncomfortable. Most people do not like networking, and so you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to tell your brain, even though you don't like this situation, you're not letting me, you don't want me to do this, I'm still going to do it. You're going to push past the discomfort, and you'll know later on that after you've done it, it'll lose its kind of hold on you. And so what you'll find in a hybrid world is that networking is a little bit more casual and informal, is because you'll continue to meet people perhaps in informal settings. So if you're going out with your friends, so more on a personal level perhaps, or if you are going to, let's say you have a co-working space that you're going to, and you may meet some people, but it's more in a casual situation, because the people the CEOs and the VPs, you're still likely, if you're working in a company, going to be meeting with them only in structured meetings, and that casual kind of informal trust building is still going to be a little bit challenging for you. And so take this time to focus on your inner circle. So go back to that exercise that we were doing about who is in your network and what do they look like and what do they sound like, and think about how you can expand your inner network in terms of in a casual, on a personal level, before we really kind of hone in on that professional, because it's not optimum. The circumstances aren't optimum for you to be able to build that to do networking on a professional level in the way that we'd like us to. And so continue that virtual networking, continue to reach out to people that you don't know, continue to have informal sessions with colleagues who you work with. Just let's have lunch together on, on Zoom, or, hey, are you in the same city? Maybe after work, we can go for a socially distanced walk. Those are things that you can potentially do to create informal situations. And I've done that and have found huge success with trying to connect with people within your company. And this is a piece of advice to my folks who identify with groups of marginalized communities, is keep showing up. And, the idea that you can't be seen, that's what's happening in the workplace, right? When women, the studies that have been done around women and women of color about not being seen in the workplace, and so they're not getting as many opportunities. And so oftentimes you will see in certain industries that are kind of notorious and unfortunately struggle with having diversity, you may see a bro club and you may see, you know, the men getting more opportunities, or people who aren't of color getting more opportunities. And the way to be able to try and help and make any small changes yourself is keep showing up. Go to all the meetings, any kind of social activity that your company is having, or that you're invited to outside of a professional context. Show up in every way that you feel comfortable, because the more that you are seen, the more that you are normalizing the person that looks like you, acts like you, sounds like you. And also be strategic. And when I mean be strategic, I don't mean to be like calculating and manipulative. In fact, I mean, think about in this time where it's more difficult to access the VP and the CEO, because you're not just walking into a room and or walking into an event where you can just introduce yourself to everybody. Take this time to build lateral relationships, which means is that take this time to build a relationship with someone. If you are at a manager level at a particular company, perhaps reach out to your counterpart at a competitor. And so build relationships with people who be more open to saying, yes, let's have networking for conversation, or who be more like likely to check their LinkedIn so that you know that they're actually going to respond to you. And I'm not saying don't reach out to the CEOs and don't reach out to the VPs. Yes, absolutely, still continue to do what you need to do. Having said that, you might find a lot of benefit in diversifying your network, in building lateral relationships. So think slightly differently about the hierarchy of people that you're connecting with. And then lastly, make it inclusive, right? We've talked about this. Make it inclusive, and how does that happen? Take this one thing away, really, if you must, from this conversation, and that is connect on curiosity, not on similarity. So connect because you really are interested in learning about this person in front of you. Curiosity is something, when I do my networking talks that are focused entirely on how to network, I focus a lot on curiosity, because asking genuine questions are really going to get you a genuine conversation, rather than looking at a checklist of questions you're supposed to ask when you walk into a networking conversation. You look like a robot, you sound like a robot. Nobody wants that. It's not fun. So really think about what can I learn? What can I take away from this conversation? Even if you think you have nothing in common. Make the effort to show up and not be like, oh yes, this person, you know, has the same background as me, it's going to be great. But if they have nothing in common, ask questions to learn something about their perspective, their experiences, and perhaps it'll just, if nothing else, you'll walk away having learned something.
You know, Sadaf, if I may add to what you just said, I recall, because we know when you work in education systems, at least in Montreal, the summertime you don't have employment for, depending on the type of work. So I recall like being in limbo whether or not I was going to continue working in the schools and so on and so forth. And I actually wasn't working. And my partner and I had gone away for a wedding in Jamaica, for like a destination wedding. And I was meeting my friends. I'm giving you the whole scenario because I didn't have a job. And one of the things I recognized was people are always like, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? And I started to question, what's my value if I say I'm unemployed? Am I no longer valuable if I'm not employed? So it was really, it was really like a great lesson for me. So now when I network with people, I say, what do you like to do? What makes you happy? Because does it really matter what you do as a job? What if it's your survival job? What if it's your in between gigs job? What if it's your, I hate what I'm doing, but my passion is something else, and that's really what I want to talk about thing, you know? So you just said something and it really hit, like, it's not, the connection isn't as strong when it's just connecting on similarity, but it's really about the curiosity. Because when you ask somebody what do they love, what moves you, what makes you passionate, they're like, now this is somebody I want to talk to and remember, you know, like that was just an anecdote I wanted to share.
Thank you, Zita. I just realized that I've been talking so much. We have 5 minutes left. And so let's open it up to questions, conversations, and feel free to share your camera.
Yes.
My last point was to pause and challenge your biases, but we have 4 minutes now, so questions.
I love how you're ending that. We'll open it up to you if you guys want to just, you know, unmute yourselves and ask or comment how you're taking this in, how you feel, if there's something you want to admit or challenge, go for it. I'm happy to say that I challenged that after I brought it up, because I was meeting all of these people and it was so apparent that what do you do came up all the time. And was I no longer valuable? Like, it really had me think about things in a different way. What about you, Emily? Is there anything you wanted to say about sharing or meeting people organically or forced even?
Such an amazing workshop, Sadaf. You're so gifted at sharing having such meaningful conversations, and you have such an effective way of doing it with such kind of simple and profound techniques. I have to say, it's really one of your gifts. I agree with all of that, because in terms of connecting with people, because I used to also, like you, Zita, always be the kind of person who, because I thought I was right. I only saw that, I always saw that, like, people would ask each other, what do you do? But I've definitely changed, and I've had such meaningful, different kinds of conversations just by asking other kinds of questions, non-work related. And yeah, and funny enough, sometimes it ends up leading to work. And sometimes you end up finding the right person when you're not even talking. And this has happened to me more than once, when you're not even talking about anything professional related, and you could be talking about the most bizarre things, which I did go, if I can share a quick story, I did go to a networking event. Was an event organized by the VDC, the VDC, Banque du Développement de Canada, and it was, I think, International Women's Day or something like that, and it was a total professional networking event. But I realized I have been shifting my ways of connecting with people, even in a networking setting. I kind of just really want to be myself and not, I'm trying to, be more of myself and not have more of a front when I'm with people. So anyway, all to say is, I went there with my sister, and she has a background in fashion, and we just ended up sparking this conversation with this other gentleman, who we ended up talking about wine, chocolate, like just the food there, and we were just laughing. It was so kind of, it felt very silly and meaningless. And it was just kind of funny. And one thing led to another. And this man has been involved in the fashion industry he's led large companies for years. And he was exactly the kind of person my sister would have liked as a mentor. So the connection was so organic. And I thought, this is really funny how things happen. And I think we have to kind of be a little bit more maybe ourselves.
Yeah. That's such a great story, because it basically is like you were just doing your thing and it kind of, just popped up, right? It made me think of something else. And there's a question that I'm going to answer really quick also, but made me think of something else, in that all too often we think that when we want a job, we should network today and the job's coming tomorrow. And oh man, it takes, sometimes there's years and years and years in between each of those situations, right? And when you perhaps get a job from someone that you worked with once and like years ago, but you kept in touch, and it's a long, networking is the long game. And I don't like to call it a game, but essentially, you're playing the long game. You're just meeting people, keep them, keep connected, keep, connecting with people, but understand that you will always, it won't always be an immediate benefit. So we had a question around techniques or tips for introverted people on how to network successfully. So introverts, this virtual world right now is like, this is your world, because oftentimes you'll find that as an introvert, you might be uncomfortable in huge groups of people, or feel overwhelmed by a lot of people in those kind of networking event situations. And so what you will do in this virtual space, which is like, you can only have one-on-one meetings, or one-on-one networking conversations. Group conversations in a networking scenario online is kind of strange, and you're talking over one another and it's considered rude. Whereas in person, if you talk over one another, it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's easier to interrupt. And so I would say that use this time to strategically connect with people you might be interested in. Think laterally, but also reach out to people that you have never met. But I also want to know if perhaps you have anything specific you're asking about when it comes to your introvert personality. Where are you struggling, right? Being an introvert is a superpower. Although I love being an extrovert too, by the way.
You know what you said about that? I feel sometimes introverts make fewer connections, but at times more meaningful connections.
Yeah.
Because as an extrovert, like, we're just kind of working a room, not in a bad way either, but I don't know if I would have you stay top of mind for me because I've met 3 or 4 or 5 folks, or more. And if you just meet 1 or 2 people, and that's the challenge in that networking session, then you really make a connection with that person. So introverts do have some serious leverage when it comes to the networking game.
100%. I know we're over time, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Zita. And if anybody wants to continue a conversation with me, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or via my email address, which is sadaf@10,000coffees.com. I'd be very, very happy to continue. I can talk about networking for eons, and I am so grateful to have had this opportunity. Thank you, all of you.
Sadaf, it's us who really are indebted to you and have to thank you, because there was something that really, really struck me, is that you're working in a field that you love and you do naturally. And it's also nice to see, I just put Sadaf's LinkedIn in the chat. It's empowering to see, and for us all to be cognizant of the fact that working in something you love is very possible. Doing things that bring you joy is very possible. And also finding ways to make your career what you want it to be is very possible through these forms of inclusive networking. So I want to thank you so much for highlighting things that I don't know if we're thinking about consciously, right? I don't know if we're thinking about the bias in the networking too, or are we seeking people out because we feel safer because they look or sound like us, versus what piques your curiosity about them? That's a really big, meaningful takeaway for me. And I hope that you all have various takeaways that maybe you want to share in the chat, or that you're ruminating on to challenge yourself as you're networking. And you've brought up some really great points in terms of how do we navigate moving forward. And I think a big one really is to orient yourself and to question first, before moving forward into any form of space, where your comforts lie. Because we all have the right to feel and be comfortable in our own way. Don't accept an invitation to meet somebody face to face if that's not where you're at just yet, right? So really reflect on what makes you comfortable, and then enjoy the process of whatever those next steps are. I really, really do want to thank you for this. There's some thanks going on in the chat. We can all practice networking all the time. There's no one best way. There's no best practice in the sense of you've done it once and you know what to do. Things are always changing. And this was so insightful to bring to mind and to stay top of mind as to how we connect and the way in which we connect. So thank you, Sadaf. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We adore you. Sadaf is our champion over on 10,000 Coffees. And I shared earlier in the chat the link for 10,000 Coffees to join on the McGill SCS Hub. It really is a lovely place to meet and connect with folks that are like-minded or not, which is really cool. So you get a chance to be a mentor or be menteed, which sometimes is as powerful as the opportunity to share your light with somebody is to learn from somebody else. Before we leave, I'm going to ask Emily if she has anything she wants to say before we wrap, and then we'll
just a thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Sadaf. Zita, you wrapped that up so perfectly. We do adore you so much. I'm so happy that we met through 10,000 Coffees and that this has flourished. Thank you so much, and we really hope to have you again for all sorts of other fun and meaningful sessions.
Yes. So thank you all. We wish you a great rest of your day. This for us is our last session. There's 2 other sessions happening that finish at 3 if anybody wants to pop in to hear that on the back end. But really, I wish you all the very best in networking, in career search, and transitions, and upskilling, and reskilling, and meeting, and more than anything, the human exchange. So thank you all. Thank you, Sadaf. This was lovely.
Thank you, Sadaf, and thank you to Zita for moderating such an amazing session.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so
Ms.
much.
Emily. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Enjoy. Have a great rest of your Saturday.